Hello and welcome to the First Bank's Center for Family-Owned Businesses webinar series. I'm Mike Vander and I'll be your facilitator. Today, we'll explore part one in a three-part series on the topic of using culture to accelerate business results. Just a quick reminder, the lines are muted, but at any time, please send us your questions through the webinar tool and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And now a 30-second opening message from First Bank President, Mike Dierberg.
When you look out to the horizon, what do you see? What does tomorrow look like? If you run a family-owned business, you see the future differently. As part of the fourth generation of my family to help lead First Bank, I know we see the future like you. At the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses, your vision is ours. Now, let our experience be yours. In this seminar, let us help you see what your future can be.
And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the host of our program, Mr. Ed Hart.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today for this monthly workshop, our monthly webinar for the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses. Over the past couple of years, we know that all of us have been through some massive changes in our organizations, in our families, our personal lives. As we've been talking with family businesses around the country over the last year or two, one of the biggest topics that continues to come up is the shift in culture with people working from home and other adjustments that we're all going through. Everyone's talking about company culture, and whatever your culture was in 2019, we're guessing probably isn't the same today, whether it's work from home or whatever else might have been contributing to your culture shift. So we decided to put together this, as Mike mentioned, this three-part series on company culture. And today we're honored to have with us Donna Brighton, who is going to talk to us about how we can use culture to accelerate these changes and these improvements in our organization that we're all looking to have happen. So I'll just share a little bit about a bio about Donna, and then we'll cut right to the chase and turn it over to her. So Donna Brighton is a culture change, forgive me for reading for a moment. Donna Brighton is a culture change strategist and masterful facilitator. Drawing from over 2 decades of experience, she combines her expertise in change management with a deep understanding of organizational culture to help leaders solidify change more rapidly and successfully through the power of culturally intelligent change. She's a skilled listener who sees possibilities, understands complexities, and partners with leaders to create solutions. Donna helps organizations get clear on the culture they need in order to achieve their objectives, then works with them to move confidently towards that ideal. Donna's clients include family businesses like Gold Eagle, not-for-profits like PGM, and organizations such as Kraft Foods, Lowe's, IKEA, and the Mayo Clinic. Donna has a master's degree in organizational leadership, as well as advanced certification in organizational change management. She's the author of Your Leadership Voice and the co-author of The Flourishing Workplace and Culturally Intelligent Change. She's a dear friend of ours at the Center of First Bank and myself personally, and I'm honored to introduce to you Miss Donna Brighton. Donna?
I was on mute, but now no longer. So thank you for that introduction, Ed, and I'm excited to share with you the answers to these 3 important questions. As Ed so wisely said, in today's world, our strategy has changed, but what about our culture? So we're going to look at, before we talk about culture, what is it? Why does it matter? And what can each and every one of you do about culture? So we're going to start our conversation defining exactly what culture is. And we're going to do that with a little breath exercise. So for all of you who are listening in today, as long as you're not driving, I'd like you to close your eyes for a minute and just pay attention to your breath. So you're breathing in and out. Now I'd like you to breathe along with me. We're going to breathe to the count of 4. In, 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now you may be wondering, what in the world was that all about? What I'd like to connect is the exercise we just did around your breath to culture. Because just like breathing, culture exists. You don't have to do anything to create it. It will naturally be created, just like breathing naturally happens. However, you can be intentional just like how we slowed down the breathing to a count of 4, which hopefully you feel a little bit more relaxed and centered as a result of slowing your breath. And we can do the same thing with culture by intentionally applying some specific actions and being purposeful about how we want our culture to look. So breathing and culture. Now, that's great. Okay, we understand that culture is just going to happen. But again, what exactly is culture? Is it our values? Is it our goals? Is it our vision and mission? Well, here's a few fun definitions that sometimes people use when they talk about culture. I love this one, the software of the mind, right? It's like the programming that's running what we're thinking about. Or perhaps it's what we're doing when no one else is looking. People often refer to culture as just the way we do things around here. And maybe you might relate to this one. It's the lessons that we've learned that are important to pass on to the next generation. So whatever is the definition of culture, I want to connect you with the research from Dr. Edgar Schein, because all those definitions we just looked at have an element of truth. But there's something very interesting that we need to understand about culture. It's multi-layered. Culture is key because it's not only the things that we see around us, right, which are the artifacts of our culture. It's not only the things that we say, the values of our organization, but it also, as at a deeper level, those beliefs. And because of that, culture can feel a little bit complex. But we're going to walk you through exactly how you can address some of the complexity of culture and get that culture aligned to the strategy to deliver the results you're looking for, or even better, accelerate those business results. So a few points you can see on this slide about culture. Culture is about what are you paying attention to? What do things mean? And what are you supposed to do in your organization? All right, so I talked about beliefs, and you might be saying, okay, how do beliefs relate to culture? So on the screen here, you see a little stack of chocolate chip cookies. Now imagine for a moment that you have just walked into a good friend's home and the aroma of fresh baked chocolate chip cookies is just wafting toward you through that door. Now you can have a couple different beliefs about the smell that you are experiencing. Belief number 1, you may say, wow, that smells really good, but I believe that sugar causes disease and therefore I don't eat sugar. So if you believe that, chances are the behavior or your actions as a result of that belief is you're going to avoid having a cookie. On the other hand, if you believe, wow, that smell is amazing and it's going to make me feel even better once I put one in my mouth. Chocolate chip cookies are my absolute favorite and I can't wait to have one. If that's your belief, chances are your behavior is going to be to indulge in a chocolate chip cookie. So which belief is right or wrong? It's the belief that drives the behavior that leads to the result that you're trying to accomplish. So I share that with you as a really simple example because that's exactly what happens in culture. There are underlying beliefs about how we interact with people, about how open and vulnerable we are in a meeting. Do I share that I'm feeling a little bit concerned about this idea, or do I keep my mouth shut? Whatever those beliefs are, drive my behavior, which then lead to results. So it's interesting because sometimes people look at an office environment and they think that represents the culture. Now, we can pick up a lot of clues when we look at the environment that people are in. So when you look at this collection of people, what are you observing? What would you say the culture is in this particular organization? Like, what kind of workplace is it? So I see a variety of people here. It's very diverse in terms of the representation of the people. It's an office environment. I'm looking at binders. So all of these give me clues to tell me more about a culture. Let's look at another example. If I were to walk into a workplace like this, I probably would have a very different assessment around the artifacts I'm looking at to determine what the culture is. And then if I show up in a workplace like this, yet again, a different culture, a different environment, different expectations on how I need to show up. Now, I want to give you a word of caution here, because just changing the environment or the artifacts around you can definitely impact culture, but that doesn't mean culture is completely different. A fun story, I was working with a client and I was doing some focus groups talking to their people, and they were saying to me, you know, our leadership, they painted all of our walls in bright, fun colors, and they updated and remodeled our kitchen, and we have free snacks. And they think that that changed our culture, but our culture is still the same. Just because they painted the walls and we have free snacks doesn't mean anything's different around here. So while the environment definitely impacts culture, it's not the same. So where exactly does culture come from? Well, culture is both caught and taught. Culture is taught through shared experiences. It's caught and taught both by where I show up in an organization, and I'll give you an example of that. Many of us have more meetings on our calendars than we really want to participate in. And I'm guessing every single meeting that you're part of is a little bit different depending upon the culture of the team or the group that you're with. In one team meeting, you may learn, hey, it's a free-for-all. We're all sharing our ideas and we want the best to come out. And maybe there's a little conflict, but that's good because it helps us get to the best answer. Or maybe you're part of a team meeting where you've learned that the leader of that meeting is going to show up, explain what needs to get done. Everybody asks questions, takes notes, and follows direction. Very different meetings. And I'm sure you've probably experienced both of them. But that's what happens when culture gets taught. We learn from those shared experiences. We learn when we show up and we volunteer an idea and it gets smacked down immediately. Wow, I probably shouldn't speak up. Then there's other factors like systems and structures, the job roles or definitions, the rewards and recognition that occur. That also helps inform culture. And I've got here that opportunity. If you're interested, I've got a white paper I'd love to share with you on the 5 culture activators that will help you learn some of the ways that you can activate the culture that you have. So if you're interested, please drop me an email at donna@brightonleadership.com and I'll share that with you. So question number 1, what is leadership? 3 things to remember. Culture exists, just like breathing, whether it's intentional, that we've done something purposeful to adjust and create it, it's accidental, it just happens like breathing. Or there are times that cultures can be hypocritical. And this is when we've said these are the values, we espouse certain values, but the way we live those values is very different and they don't line up. So culture exists, again, whether it's intentional, accidental, or hypocritical. Culture is the underlying beliefs that lead to specific behaviors, the way we act, which then translate into results. And quite simply, culture's how work gets done. It's how we interact, how we engage with each other, or simply how we do things around here. So when we're trying to understand how can culture accelerate our business results, let's talk about why culture matters. So I was working with a CEO and he was feeling really frustrated about this idea of designing or developing the ideal culture for his organization. As Ed mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, there's times where there's so much change in the environment, like over the last few years, that your business strategy changes, but what about your people strategy? Do you have an ideal people strategy to align with that business strategy? So I was working with the CEO and he was contemplating this idea of the ideal culture or his people strategy. And he was like, I'm just not comfortable with this because, you know, I want to be a diverse, inclusive, welcoming environment. And if I get too specific about what matters most, about how we show up and behave in this organization, he's like, well, maybe there's some people who won't feel welcome. And he kept thinking about this. And the following day, he came in and it was like he had a eureka moment. And here's what he recognized, is that it's really important to get clear. He said, just like McDonald's serves hamburgers, I know when I go into a McDonald's exactly what I'm going to get. Now, if I walk into this building, a Pizza Hut, and I think I'm going to get hamburgers, not so much. What he realized is that by getting clear and specific, defining that ideal culture, it would enable him to attract the right people to the organization, people that wanted hamburgers or the people that wanted pizza. You have to be clear and specific. So culture matters because that degree of specificity, that degree of how clear you are about your organization enables people to understand what they can expect when they show up. So why does culture matter? I love this illustration. It shows arrows going in all different directions. And that, unfortunately, is how many people feel in an organization. They feel like they're going in all, in this team we're this way, in that team we're that way. We're in a whole bunch of different directions. And without alignment around the purpose and the culture of an organization, you are not leveraging the full potential of your people. So why culture matters? Culture enables you to create alignment among the people in your organization so they're moving in the same direction, showing up with the behaviors that enable them to move forward together. So this is a compare and contrast. Again, once you've had those arrows moving in all different directions, you align your culture, you get it moving forward in the same direction, so everybody's pointed the same way. Here's a compare and contrast, a before and an after. When you're unintentional about culture, you may be aware that it exists, but chances are you do not have a common language. You've not been measuring it, so you don't understand, is it really what I think it is? Or maybe there's a difference between my experience and other people's experience. Probably there's no understanding of how to enable the change in your culture in order to get it aligned to that business strategy. And there may be a lack of alignment between that culture, how your teams function, and how you're growing and developing your people. And without intentionality, you may lack any connection between that strategic plan that you have, the business strategy, with the culture or your people strategy, and how that works together, the collaboration between those two so that your people deliver on the business strategy. As a result, there can be inconsistent employee satisfaction, lower motivation, and maybe even people aren't collaborating together as well as they could. And as a result, the performance that you're seeing is less than what you would like. So culture matters because it can address all of these things and enable you, again, to be clear, focused, aligned, and pointing in the same direction. So I would ask, as you think about your organization, what are some of your greatest business challenges? Is it around teamwork and collaboration, perhaps innovation, staying agile and keeping up with the changing environment around you? Is it around implementing the strategy? So you've defined exactly what you want to accomplish in your business strategy, but the execution of it maybe isn't as good as you'd like. Maybe it's attracting and retaining talent. In today's world, we've heard so many different comments about things like quiet quitting, about the great resignation, all of these phrases that are being thrown around. But the ultimate impact of them is often it's hard to find the people that we need to keep our businesses moving forward. Well, my friends, those business challenges are actually culture challenges. They're people challenges. And why culture matters, again, it prevents alignment, but culture matters because when you align it, It will help improve or even accelerate your business results, which is the whole premise of this webinar. Multiple studies have reinforced this concept that when your culture is aligned with your strategy, meaning that it's supportive of it, you can achieve almost a 50% improvement, a differential in that performance. And then there was a group of leaders that were surveyed, and they showed in their results that the corporate strategy, while very important, was not as important as the culture of the organization, how they worked together to accomplish where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do. So culture is essential in delivering your business results. And if you want to accelerate them, you want to pay attention to it and be purposeful in your culture. So often I see there can be a gap between somebody's business strategy, which is the things that you want to achieve in your business, and the business results in exactly what you're getting. And every time I look at that organization and say, where's the gap? What's going on? It comes down to culture. Culture is that incredibly powerful force that tells people how to behave, that explains what values matter most, and how we work together. And how we work together can either help or hinder that business strategy. So when we get right down to it, my question for you is, what is your people strategy? How are you optimizing your talent? How are you enabling your people to translate that business strategy you have into business results? Because ultimately, your people are what power your performance and can accelerate your business results. So culture matters. And why? 3 things. First of all, clarity. Clarity in your culture helps you attract and retain the right people. Number 2, alignment, getting everybody moving in the same direction so that you can harness or leverage that full potential of the people that are in your organization. And finally, culture matters because it helps you accelerate your business results. So we've talked about what exactly is culture, why does it matter, and finally, what can you do about culture? So I'm going to suggest 3 things that you can do as you consider culture. First, define ownership, then create the clarity that we talked about that matters so very much, and finally, align your culture with strategy. So I love this book. It's called Hit Refresh. It's by the CEO of Microsoft. And the title that stood out to me that I think is so important to reinforce for all of us, he said the C in CEO stands for culture. And that matters because culture is a leadership responsibility. While it's true that culture can just emerge because a group of people is working together and they learn how to navigate and work together, culture is also a leadership responsibility. But I want to share a nuance here, and this is what we're going to explore in part 2 of our webinar series. And that is the family system in your family business can impact and does impact the organizational culture. So as leaders in your family business, the question is, do you prioritize your business results or family first? There's not a right or a wrong answer, but it's important to understand how your organizational culture is being informed by that family system. And again, join us in part 2 because that's going to help you learn more about the family system and how it influences organizational culture. So ownership comes down to, and I'm talking about ownership in the culture. Who owns the culture? Leaders do. And leaders can be intentional, accidental, just let it happen, or they can be hypocritical. So our encouragement to you is be intentional in your culture and join us for part 2 to understand how your family system informs that. Secondly, what you can do about culture, create clarity. And I've got two strategies here I want to talk about. Creating intentionality in your culture and refreshing your values, or potentially defining them for the first time. So as we think about being intentional in your culture, there's 3 easy steps that you can take as you think about culture. The first is to gather bias-free data. Believe it or not, virtually every leader I work with has an idea about what their culture is, but the reality does not match their idea. And that's the value of gathering that bias-free data. And that can be done through observation and assessment. And what happens is that in this bias-free data, we're able to better understand what are the beliefs and the behaviors that are helping you be successful, and what are the beliefs and the behaviors that exist in the organization that are holding you back. So that's step number 1, is simply gather data, and not just any data, bias-free people data. Next, there's always a gap, as I mentioned, between what currently exists and our ideal. What is it that we desire? What culture is actually going to help us accelerate that business strategy? Well, once you have the data, you're able to tell the difference between where you are, where you want to go, and you can get clear on what you need to move from and what you need to move to. And so I suggest a very simple framework here. Exactly that. We want to move from this behavior to this behavior. And here's some examples. There was an organization that I worked with that they were feeling really frustrated, where the leaders were like, how come nobody's getting involved? They're not engaging. We want to like break down the silos, and we want people to ask more questions, but they show up at meetings and go off and do whatever they want. So what they got very specific about were the behaviors that they wanted to move from: not sharing their input in meetings, not giving their ideas, their best thinking in a meeting. That was what they needed to stop doing. And what they were moving to, what they needed to start doing, was an open and positive sharing of ideas and feedback. So they got really specific in that gap about what are the new behaviors and what are we going to stop doing. So once you assess your data, you get clear on what you need to do to close the gap between what exists and what you want, and then you remeasure it. So those are the actions if you want to create culture change. But maybe that's not for you. Maybe a different action for you in terms of what you can do about culture is simply refresh your values. Perhaps you have them, perhaps you don't. But I want to walk you through a couple things to recognize about defining values. Because remember, I showed you there's kind of 3 parts when you think about culture. There's the artifacts, what you see around you, that environment in the workplace, or maybe on the Zoom, what's behind people. Then there's the values, and then there's those underlying beliefs. So when it comes to defining values, too many times I see organizations that simply have a word. And on my screen, I'm showing you the word integrity, because this is a value I find many organizations say, yes, that's really important to us. But what matters when you're defining your value is not just the word, but also what does you uniquely mean by that value. So for every value, we say in your organization, you need to name it, define it, and explain it. And you'll see on the screen here, there's 2 examples from 2 completely different organizations we worked with that talk about integrity. So in one organization, integrity was what they meant by it was being straightforward and honest, putting people first by consistently being respectful. That was their definition. Then, remember I said you can't just name it, define it, you also need to explain it. They had specific behaviors so people knew whether they were living that value or not. And then some examples of the behaviors: we accept responsibility for our actions and words. We look for the best in people and situations. We honor our commitments. All very specific behaviors. Now that's great for this organization, but another organization I worked with, also chose integrity as their value, but they said for them, what the definition meant was acting in the best interest of all stakeholders through goodwill and honesty. That was their definition. But again, the name of the value, the definition of the value, then the behaviors, the explanation of how you live that value out. So you can see here, respect showed up in both definitions. In this one, the behavior was we're respectful of each other and honor our differences. But how that shows up, how that was manifested is completely different. And that's really important because your organization is unique and you need to define your values in such a way that it reflects how you behave, how you uniquely shape your culture in your environment. Another example, this is innovation. Lots of people think this is a really important value. And again, in this slide, you can see 3 different examples of innovation. The behaviors that people felt were important when they demonstrated innovation varied everything from challenging the status quo to we value diverse perspectives and encourage healthy debate. To another behavior from the third organization, we step outside of our comfort zone and apply different thinking and approaches. All different, but specific to that organization. So whether you're defining your values for the first time or refreshing them, as in the case of the one organization I worked with, it was a family-owned business, and the values had last been updated in the 60s. So it was a fantastic opportunity to bring the organization together and rethink what are the behaviors, what are the ways that we uniquely show up and work together to successfully deliver our business results. So 3 things that you can do about culture: get clear on who owns it, that's leadership. Second, create clarity. And that was either through doing that culture assessment process or simply refreshing or defining your values. And number 3, aligning your culture with your strategy. So if you remember, I talked about the reality that often your business strategy and results are not quite aligned. And the reason for that is people. People are at the heart, at the center of everything that happens in business. So your opportunity here is to create an intentional culture, to develop a people strategy, and to optimize your talent, which simply means help your people get in the right seat to doing the right work and being on the right team. So in our conversation today, we answered those 3 questions. What is culture? Why does culture matter? And what can I do about culture? And now, Ed, I'd like to turn it over and see if there's any questions that came in from the audience that we can answer.
All right, great. Thanks so much. This is Mike. We do have a couple of questions. Before I get to those, just a quick reminder, if you have a question, go ahead and type it right into that webinar tool, and we will get that addressed to our presenter. So the first question says, how does cultural alignment intersect with personality, generational, and ethnic differences?
Wow, okay. Before I answer that, Mike, I would like to remind everybody that I'm happy to share the 5 culture activators if they email me at Donna Brighton, and I'm going to go full screen now. So if you would repeat that for me. I think we talked about the intersection of a couple of things. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. So how does cultural alignment intersect with personality, generational, and ethnic differences?
Okay. So I would say all of those elements, personality, generations, and ethnic differences, all inform culture and also informed your experience, right? So one of the presentations I love doing for organizations is talking about effective communication, because unfortunately we are often making assumptions and not understanding the differences in generation, in ethnicity, in personality, and we make conclusions. But we're talking about that when it comes to alignment with culture. And this is why it's so important to get clear and get specific about the values in your organization and what those behaviors need to look like. And I'll give an example of that. I was working with a company. It was kind of a technology startup company, and they were integrating a bunch of other organizations. And they were really proud of their DE&I, their diversity, equity, and inclusion program. But what we found out when we were having a conversation in the focus groups with the team members were that people didn't believe that they were actually living out that value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I share that with you because when it comes to alignment in culture, if you aren't clear and specific about what you mean, everybody's going to define it the way they want to, and they're going to believe you're not living up to it. And that's exactly what happened in this organization. They had not defined what they meant, so everybody thought that they missed out, that they were actually not living in alignment. So when it comes to personality, when it comes to generation, when it comes to ethnicity, all of those things can inform our understanding and awareness and our experience of culture. And it's really important that we are clear and specific when we define what culture looks like for our organization.
All right, thank you so much for that question and that answer. Another question here says, what's the difference between culture and doing an engagement survey?
Oh, that's a good one. And a lot of people confuse the two. So both have value, but they're very different. I like to think of engagement surveys as finding out information that has already occurred. So it's sort of like you think about engagement, it's how are things currently going? It's giving us very valuable information. Now, I want to be clear here. Information is only valuable if you act upon it, right? So engagement survey can give us data, but it's a lagging measure, meaning whatever's occurred in the organization, you're reporting on it. Like, I am proud to work here, or I would tell somebody else about this organization. Those are the kinds of questions that are often asked in an engagement survey. Again, they can provide valuable data, and leaders can take that data and create some action plans around it. But here's something I find really puzzling. Engagement has been a measure for decades. I mean, it's been around for a really long time. And if you look at the measure of engagement, it hasn't changed a lot over the last years. And lots of organizations are investing in engagement. So my question for you is engagement actually the right measure, or is there something else? And that's where I believe that understanding, measuring your culture and using the levers within your culture to adjust, shift, and align to your strategy, that's the secret. And I've actually worked with an organization where we measured the culture, used some culture levers to make some adjustments, and continued to measure it. And over the course of 5 years, completely shifted the culture, and that resulted in massively improved business results. Because unlike engagement, which is the lagging measure, culture is a leading measure. Culture is a way that you can, in advance, understand how things are going to work out. So I'm not going to say you should do one versus the other. I know many organizations do both, but I really believe in the power of measuring and understanding your culture and aligning what is important to you, your ideal, with what exactly exists right now and closing that gap.
All right, thank you so much for that question and that answer. We are going to bring Ed back, and I believe Ed has a question of his own.
Thank you, Donna. First of all, thank you so much. This has been really great information today. Something that has come up in a lot of conversations that I've been involved with over the last couple of years, and really the impetus behind us wanting to have this conversation, if you will. He talks today about how we have the actual culture and the ideal, and the gap oftentimes is the leadership and the people. Talk about the environment that many of us are in right now, including some of us here even at First Bank, where our leadership and our people aren't in the same physical space. Many of us are working from home. I have family members who work for companies who've been told, you can always work from home now. How do we manage and engage and really modify and enhance our culture when maybe we're not even in the same space?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. I think it's something,
but at least for now.
Yes, it's something that I believe every organization is challenged by right now. And I'm going to say challenged by because we're still learning a lot about how can we better engage people. Like you said, when I'm not in the same room, I have a different experience. That's just the reality of it. And so is our measure of success the experience that people have and their engagement? Is our measure of success the productivity level? Like what does success look like in this situation? And so that would be the first question I would have for a business leader. What do you want to accomplish? Some of the things I would say, working remotely, while it can enable people to work in a distraction-free environment, there are some studies that are coming back that shows that it can reduce things like loyalty because you're not feeling as connected, right? The research shows that one of the primary engagement or connection factors at work is when you feel like you have a best friend or somebody that you're closely connected with. And it's a lot harder to do that in a remote environment. So that's really important, and even feeling connected to your manager. So in these times when people have the reality that they're managing in a hybrid situation, some people are remote, some people may not be, the number one suggestion I have is being intentional. So what is it that you want to accomplish? Back to what does success look like? You want to help your people be productive. You want to help them be engaged. Great. Okay, now that I understand that, what are you going to do about it? And I would say, number one, as a manager, are you doing your regular one-on-ones with your team members, right? Just having those conversations. Another observation I had, Ed, is that somehow we've lost the value of celebration. I don't know if you've noticed that, but in the workplace in the past, we would celebrate birthdays, we would celebrate people and anniversaries and all these things. And what you celebrate or pay attention to is what you get more of. And so I have a theory that because that celebration has diminished over time, it's also led to a loss in engagement or connectivity of people to an organization. So back to what can you do about it is be intentional. And I don't know what that looks like for whoever's listening, but maybe it means bringing in some type of celebratory event, bringing people together. I know during even actually prior to the pandemic, I worked with an organization where we were implementing a hybrid strategy. And one of the things that was really important to the leaders was they gathered people together in person on a regular basis. Now, that may or may not be possible, but just, it made, so you may not be in the office every day, but creating rhythms and being intentional, back to my point, about how do we gather people together so they can benefit from the in-person as well as remote.
I think you hit it on the head there. As you talked about celebration, it reminded me that most of us were sent home, if you will, in March of 2020. Birthdays and anniversaries and special occasions that were happening in the first 3, maybe 4 months. We had the drive-by birthdays, people driving by people's homes to celebrate the holiday wave.
Yes.
We had, my birthday was a month later in April, and a bunch of my friends came online on Zoom and did a birthday celebration. For those who were, it's been a year or 6 months or whatever, it seemed like a lot of that tapered off. And I think you're spot on that need, that desire, not just for people connection, but those celebrations. So to bring back and celebrate those things if you are in a remote environment, that just resonates so well with me. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. And one other point there, Ed, another element that really creates a strong culture is the rituals. Right. Yeah. And I'm sure you've heard of that, the people who had the purple chair, that was the award that got passed from office to office. Right. And now we're all working remote. So there is no chair that we can move from one office to the other. Or another manager that I worked with, she gave out little stones that said, "You rock." Right. Mm-hmm. So whenever somebody did something awesome, she was like, "You're amazing. You rock." Right. So those were, again, the rituals that created the culture, and those, in addition to the celebrations, those rituals have also gone by the wayside. So back to being intentional. What are some of the rituals that you can create with your people to keep them connected?
Excellent. Well, Donna, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us today to share these wonderful ideas. I hope all of you, like myself, have picked up at least 1 or 2 or 3 nuggets that you can use. So many things struck me as Donna was talking today. Again, a reminder, part 2 will be next month in November with Dr. Allie Taylor of Orange Kiwi Consulting. And then we're going to bring it all together in January. We're going to skip December for holidays and other things that we have planned that we'll share with you soon. But in January, we'll bring Allie and Donna back together, and we'll have really a conversation of putting all of this together. Donna, could you share with us one more time your email address, how people reach you?
Yes, thanks, Ed. It's Donna at brightonleadership.com. Donna at Brighton Leadership. And let me know, drop me a line, and I will send you a copy of the 5 culture activators, which is completely free, how you can immediately start benefiting from your culture.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Donna. Highly recommend that you tap into that resource of Donna. She's fantastic, as you've heard today. If you have any questions about First Bank or the Center for Family-Owned Businesses, you can simply visit first, just go to www.first.bank, and that will bring you to the bank site. Put a / add family business at the end, and that'll take you right to our unique landing page for the Center for Family-Owned Businesses. Past events and webinars, upcoming events and webinars, research articles, and so forth. Lots of information there for you, the family businesses that we care about and serve. Whether you're a client of First Bank or not, your family business is our business, as you'll see our President Mike Dierberg say in that very top part of the page. So thank you all for being with us today. Again, you can reach me directly also at ed.hart@fbol.com or visit our website at first.bank. We're going to send it back to Mike to wrap it up, and we want to thank you again for your time today. Donna, again, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again at our November webinar as well.